Should you be training to failure? Let's discuss. What's up everyone, Zach Nusser here, bringing you another training science video, and this time we're going to discuss whether or not you should be going to failure during your resistance training. We'll be covering a 2016 systematic review and meta-analysis by Davies and colleagues, which examined 8 different studies on the effects of training to failure versus non-failure training on muscular strength, 4 of which controlled for training volume, while the remaining 4 studies did not. Non-failure training resulted in a 0.6 to 1.3% greater strength increase than failure training. A small pooled effect favoring non-failure training was found. Significant small pooled effect on muscular strength were also found for non-failure versus failure training with compound exercises and trained participants. A slightly larger pooled effect favoring non-failure training was observed when volume uncontrolled studies were included. No significant effect was found for the volume controlled studies, although there was a trend favoring non-failure training. This study concludes that it seems similar increases in muscular strength can be achieved with failure and non-failure training. Furthermore, it seems unnecessary to perform failure training to maximize muscular strength. However, if incorporated into a program, training to failure should be performed sparingly to limit the risks of injuries and overtraining. Numerous recent studies have also supported a lack in difference in training adaptations between failure and non-failure training in regards to hypertrophy. There are a number of reasons as to why this may be the case. First, it's important to determine what's defined as failure training in these studies. In most studies, it appears that training to failure is defined as the subject's inability to perform a rep at full range of motion, implying that they tried for one final rep and failed on that rep. While the definition of failure may vary slightly between studies, they were all similar enough to be comparable and relevant. Training to failure can either mean stopping when the subject is unable to perform another rep with full range of motion and proper form, which is sort of a powerlifting definition, or pushing until actually failing a rep, which is kind of a bodybuilding definition. With the definition of failure now established, we can now determine how non-failure training is defined in these studies. First, it's important to note that non-failure training in these studies is very close to failure training. This means that non-failure training likely stopped with about 1 full rep in the tank. This is important because it means that the intensity between failure and non-failure training was very close, as opposed to stopping with 3+ reps left in the tank, which would have likely displayed different results. So why were non-failure results slightly better in these studies? This is likely due to the higher levels of acute or short-term fatigue and muscle damage in the failure groups, resulting in longer recovery times and longer hindrances in performance during that recovery phase. Because the differences were so small and statistically insignificant, as well as the explanation as to why they likely occurred, they most likely mean nothing. So this meta-analysis suggests that going to failure is pointless. The author even states in the conclusion that it seems unnecessary to perform failure training to maximize muscular strength. I'd add that it's not only mostly unnecessary, but also potentially harmful due to the much higher injury risk, as well as the undue stress on the joints and significantly higher levels of nervous system fatigue. However, the author also suggests that if failure training is incorporated into a program, that it should be performed sparingly to limit the risks of injuries and overtraining. So does this suggest that there might actually be some benefits to failure training? I think when it comes to periodized training programs, that there is room for occasional failure training. A common strategy for periodization is overreaching, where volume or intensity is increased for a week or two, then brought back to lower volume or intensity. In my opinion, this is a good fit for failure training within your mesocycle or current training block. You can overreach with intensity during the last week or two by simply pushing to failure on a few exercises, then dropping the intensity the following week for your deload or recovery week, allowing for proper neuromuscular recovery. That said, I would avoid training to complete failure, or again the bodybuilding style failure, on certain high risk exercises. Squats and deadlifts especially are examples of exercises I would simply avoid training to the point of failing a rep, where the risk of injury and the severity of potential injuries is significantly escalated. Instead, try overreaching by training to the point of failure as defined in powerlifting, where you don't fail the rep, but rather stop knowing you would fail on the next rep. Another way to temporarily overreach with these exercises would be to increase the volume instead of the intensity. Going to failure on exercises like dumbbell lateral raises or dumbbell bicep curls is far less taxing on the body, and the risk of injury is much lower. These smaller muscle groups have the advantage of being able to recover far more quickly. Because of this, it's okay to train to failure on these kind of exercises more frequently. Though again, it's likely unnecessary because the increased intensity will almost definitely decrease your overall volume. likely negating any potential benefits of failure training. So going to failure on each set will actually reduce the number of reps you're able to complete on following sets, again reducing your overall volume. So here I'd recommend training to failure only on the very last set to get some of the potential benefits of failure training without hindering your overall training volume. One final point that I'd like to make is that failure training really should be reserved for more advanced trainees, and I'd recommend avoiding it altogether if you're a novice trainee, unless you have a trainer or a coach to make sure that your form is absolutely perfect to avoid injuries. Alright everyone, thank you so much for watching. Make sure to like and share the video and subscribe to the channel to keep up to date on everything fitness. Leave any questions and comments you have in the comment section down below. Follow me on social media, and I'll see you guys next time.